Hi guys, I'm going to start this new thing on Mondays called Manny's and a Mystery, where we're going to visit and I'm going to talk to you a little about some kind of creepy mystery I found. Today, as I'm doing my Manny, we're going to talk about the Batman of Los Angeles. And let me tell you, the Batman of Los Angeles is nothing like you're picturing. Now, in 1922, this apron manufacturer, whose name was Fred Ostrich, was shot dead in his Los Angeles home. The police found his wife, Dolly Ostrich, screaming in a closet. And that closet was locked from the outside. As the only living person in the house, Dolly was she quickly became the prime suspect. There's no one else in the house, right? However, it was kind of impossible to murder your husband and then lock yourself in the closet from the outside. There's just no way she could have locked herself in the closet without some kind of secret passage, telekinesis, or I don't know, maybe some kind of trained camouflage locking or closet locking octopus at her disposal. And let's face it, none of us really has one of those handy. So it seemed destined to become one of those completely unsolvable cases by the police. You really can't blame them, right? But don't worry. This is called Manny's and a Mystery for a good reason. Because this case totally gets weirder. So Dolly, come to find out, has this lover, Otto. Now Otto had been secretly living in the Ostrich's attic for years. Not just a little while, not just for the day, but for years. This wasn't even the first secret attic this guy had lived in. You guys, more than one attic. So let's give a little bit of history here. So before the Ostrichs moved to Los Angeles, Otto spent freaking years and years stashed away in their Wisconsin home. See, what happened is Otto began his love affair with Dolly while working for her husband, Fred, at 17. See, Dolly was a bored stay-at-home housewife, and she called her husband, Fred, and said, "Look, honey, I need you to send over somebody. My sewing machine, it's just not working." And so Fred sent some low man on the totem pole, Otto. Because, what else are you going to have a 17-year-old do? So he sent Otto to his house to fix the sewing machine his wife was complaining about. Well, when Otto got there, Dolly, she had some other plans. Because Dolly opened the door in her robe, some stockings, and pretty much that's it. So she and Otto began this cute little affair that lasted forever. And see, when it's 1922, her neighbors probably didn't have much else going on, and they started to become suspicious of Otto visiting all the time. In the beginning, Dolly convinced them that it was her kind of sad little brother who came over all the time, but the neighbors weren't really buying it. So Dolly came up with this grand plan. You guys, she convinced poor little Otto. Now remember, he's just 17. She convinced poor little Otto to quit his job. Quit his job, not just quit his job and become her, fun little side boy. She convinced him to quit his job and move into attic, because that seemed like the normal thing to do. I mean, isn't that the next step that one does in a relationship? Quit life and move into the attic. The craziest part, you guys, is that's what Otto did. He gave up all human interaction and moved into the attic. Yeah, moved straight into the attic. So, the life of poor Otto. I don't know how poor he was. He really did do this on his own. But, Otto, the attic side piece, his life was really not a glamorous one. I mean, would yours be if you were in the attic? So aside from his daily little visits with Dolly when Fred was at work, he pretty much spent all of his days in complete isolation. So he read books that Dolly rented him from the library. He slept on a small little cot in one corner. He drank, probably a lot, but drank and made bathtub gin. Does that even sound good? And he had a habit of writing these pulp fiction stories, some of which he actually got published under a pen name. So he's living the attic side piece high life, I guess. And during these years, the only person that Otto was ever able to see was Dolly. That's who he talked to. I mean, he would later say in an interview that he was essentially her sex slave. So you've got Otto living upstairs, Fred living downstairs. And even though Fred had over the years turned into this heavy drinker, he kind of started to notice things. Like, he would notice shadows, kind of mysterious shadows outside his bedroom door. He would hear strange noises, and he would start missing an occasional cigar. So, I mean, even though he was a heavy drinker, there were certain things that old friend was starting to notice. In all honesty, things that are kind of inevitable as that you would kind of find if you had someone living in your attic. So Fred's noticing these things. Dolly's playing him off, and he's noticing these tiny little nuances that are byproducts of some stranger living in your attic for years, like years at this point. So Fred is kind of convinced he is really starting to lose his mind. I mean, he is questioning his sanity without a doubt. So because Fred is questioning his sanity, he has decided, that's it. We need to move. A change of scenery is in order because he's losing his mind. So a move to LA, that didn't help with these issues, of course. I mean, Dolly could not leave her little attic pet behind. She made it a condition, straight out condition for their new house that it must have an attic. Like, that was her number one rule. Some people want a large kitchen. Dolly wanted an attic. And then she secretly managed to move Otto with them. Literally across country from Wisconsin to California. I don't even know how. There's no real... I looked, you guys, and there was no, explanation on how she moved him that far. But, so, they moved to Los Angeles. She snuck Otto and what little worldly possessions he probably had up into the attic. So, they're living the good life, but you know what? Even though it was Los Angeles, change of scenery, Dolly and Fred's marriage started to deteriorate. Fred began to drink more, and with the drinking, the arguments ensued. And these arguments started to become more and more violent. Louder, more violent, neighbors were starting to notice, that kind of thing. Well, during one of these arguments, Fred began to drink, and he and Dolly began to argue, and they got to be a lot more violent than they had in the past. A lot more. So much so that Otto, in, protection, he came charging down the stairs, toting 2 of Fred's guns, like dual wielding, like double fisting those guns. And to protect Dolly, he shot Fred 3 times in the chest. Killing him instantly. Thinking fast, a lot faster than I think I would have in the same situation, he threw Dolly in the closet, locked the door, and went back up to the attic. Because of Dolly's screaming, her neighbors called the cops. Even back in 1922, that's the way things happened. And so the neighbors called the cops and said, look, they're going crazy over there. And the cops came out, got Dolly out, and she told everybody that there had been a robbery. She told everybody that the robber came in and stole an awfully expensive watch. Because robbers steal expensive things. And yeah, this watch, it's important later. He stole this expensive watch and shot poor Fred 3 times and locked her in the closet. So they turned around, searched the whole house, could not find this robber, and called it good. And told, they were suspicious of Dolly because there was really no evidence really of a break-in. They couldn't find the guns. They couldn't find any other evidence to the contrary. They didn't believe her, but they had no proof at the time to prove otherwise. So everyone was, there were no charges filed. Everyone kind of went on their merry way. The widow, Dolly, inherited all of Fred's money, which was a substantial sum. Even in today's day and age, a few $1 million will do ya. And she even purchased a new house with an attic, of course. Even though Otto could come down from the attic, he didn't. He could, but he did not. Otto carried on living as Dolly's personal little attic slave while she struck up new relationships with her husband's late husband's escrow lawyer. Not only did she start to date him, she also started to date a second boyfriend, a businessman named Clum. I forget his first name. Roy Clum, not Ray Clum. So she struck up this new relationship with the late husband's lawyer and this businessman, Roy Clum. So Dolly, she's getting real serious with Roy and the lawyer. And so she starts asking the lawyer and Roy, not Ray, certain questions. And it's no big deal. She's really, she's kind of really hooked on both guys. And she ends up giving the lawyer this really expensive watch. Kind of familiar as the lawyer's starting to think about it. This was the same watch that was supposedly in that robbery scenario. Don't worry, guys. She doesn't blow her cover. She convinced a guy to live in her attic. So she's pretty quick on her feet. And she's like, oh, sweetie, don't worry. I found it in the cushions of the couch. And it seemed kind of silly to pester the police about these kind of things. And, her lawyer boyfriend's like, oh, totally get it, and didn't think anything of it. Later that night, on another date with Mr. Roy Klum, she tells him, honey, I found one of these guns. And she, for whatever reason, she didn't want it in the house. Well, she told Roy she didn't want it in the house because she didn't really want the police to suspect her because it's a similar gun that the burglars use. So could he go throw it in the La Brea tar pits for her? She just didn't want it around. And he did. And to me, this blows my mind. But again, remember, she did ask her little Otto to quit life and live in her attic. And he did so willingly. She didn't hold anything on him. He did this on purpose. So as things get progressing, relationships, as sometimes happens, ended. And Dolly was no longer dating Mr. Roy Klum. And I guess it didn't end very well. It got kind of volatile at the end. They really didn't like each other. And so Klum, because he's mad at Dolly, goes to the police and tells the police how Dolly convinced him to get rid of this gun in the tar pits. So because of this, Dolly was arrested in 1923, a year after her husband's murder. But there was really still no proof of any murder. And the cops were still unable to explain how Dolly ended up in the closet. I mean, she was locked in there from the outside. And they could find nobody else in the house. So Dolly's sitting in jail. And don't worry, Dolly keeps things interesting because she was not done asking favors of her men friend. Don't forget, she had a second boyfriend. And the lawyer. And she asked her lawyer boyfriend, Harold Shapiro was his name, if while she was in jail waiting to be released, if Harold would do her a favor and take her little attic pet some groceries. He needs food. And so yeah, she ended up disclosing Otto's location and that Otto had been living in her attic to her lawyer boyfriend. So yeah, Harold went there, found him in the attic, and instead of running, I personally maybe would have ran down the hall to the police and said, guys, she has somebody else living in the attic. Did you check the attic? There's a dude living there. No, Dolly had some kickin' charming persona, and she went and convinced him, and he obliged, you guys, to go to the house and talk to dear old Otto. Well, believe it or not, maybe it's hard to believe, it kind of is to me, this kind of proved to be Otto and Dolly's undoing. Because when Harold went and was speaking to Otto. Now remember, Otto's not seen anybody but Dolly for years. Years and years. And so he was so excited to have somebody new to talk to, somebody in on this little secret too, that Otto just started talking and didn't shut up. And so he told Harold everything from the get-go. And I mean, again, Harold didn't go run into the police. Harold decided he didn't want to share his girlfriend. And so he told Otto to take a hike. He said, Otto, dude, it's time. You left the attic. Man, it's time. And so Otto did. He left the attic. He actually changed his name and moved to Canada for a while. And believe it or not, after being in Canada for a couple years, Otto came back, got married, and lived a normal life. Like, he married somebody who went out in public with him. And it was, he lived his life. Harold and Dolly were living their good old life. But as things happen, Harold, the lawyer, did go to the police 7 years later. Why? Because he and Dolly broke up. Now, Dolly and Otto were both arrested for their crime. Dolly was acquitted because she was locked in the closet. She didn't do anything. They couldn't prove she did anything. It wasn't premeditated. And Otto, he was convicted of manslaughter and put in jail. But Otto was later released. Totally weird, right? No, because the statute of limitations on manslaughter had expired. And so everyone involved, including Otto, was off the hook. Dolly lived the rest of her days as, a free woman, enjoying her late husband's wealth, buying houses, partying up like they did back then. And Otto, there's really nothing written about Otto. So I assume that it's safe to say he lived very quietly with his new wife, just a quiet, out of the public eye kind of life. So there you go. That's my first story in my Manny's and Mystery series. So I did the green. It's kind of hard to see. A light pink and a fun sparkle. Now I hope you guys join me next week for the next Manny Mysteries. And, thanks for joining. Have fun. Be safe in this crazy world out there. And I'll see you later. Bye.